Hello everyone, it's Trina from the Alluring Bead Boutique, and I'm back today to finish up with part 3 of our beautiful little earring project that we've been working on. In part 1 of the video, we started with our materials and we went ahead and created our beaded bezel for the beautiful Swarovski crystal Chaton. And I have that sitting here ready for adding to our design here in a little while. In part 2, we started by doing our first row of brick stitch on the inside of our frame. Then we did our row of brick stitch here on the outside of our frame. Then we came up and we added our 16 8OC beads. And we finished off by doing this next row here where we added some accent beads. We did brick stitch with some delicas. We have 6 of our 8Os sitting in the center. And then we came across and we did the same thing on the opposite side. So now we're ready to move on. So when we ended up the last time, we had just finished adding these 3 accent beads right here. We passed down through this 6OC bead on the end, and then we came down through the delica right there. So now what we need to do to carry on is we need to be coming out of this first delica, heading back in the opposite direction. So it's really easy. What we're going to do is we're just going to stitch back through our beads. So we're coming out of the bottom of the delica here. We're just going to go up through the one right beside of it to the right for me because I'm left-handed. And we're going to sew down and up through these delicas until we get to where we need to be. So I'm going to come down the next one over, and I'm going to go up the next one over. And this time when I go up through that delica, I can also pass up through the 8OC bead and that delica right there to the far left, and I'll be in position to start working. So now I've stitched myself over and I'm ready to begin. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to add some accent beads again between the first delica and the second delica. We're going to pick up a 15-0, a delica, and a 15-0. We're coming out of that first delica. We're just simply going to stitch down through the next delica, just like that. And pull. Then we're just going to take our needle and we're going to stitch up through the next delica, which will be the third one. And if it's a little tight, just take your time and poke yourself up through there. So now for this part of our work, we're going to be needing, we don't need our 8, we do need some 8Os too, so just leave those out. So I've got out my 15Os, delicas, 8Os, and I'm going to dump out some Tilas. So now we're ready to do this portion right here. So we are, okay, hold on. So if you'll notice that underneath this Tila, I have went across with my same accent beads. I'm going to pick up the same 3 beads. We'll pick up the 15-0, delica, 15-0, and sew down through the next bead. We're going to sew up through the next delica. And try not to stab yourself with your needle. It's a little bit tight for some reason, but we'll get through it. There. I think I'm having a little trouble with my light. I'm going to make an adjustment, and I'll be right back. And then we're just going to repeat that same step one more time. We're going to pick up a 15-0, delica, 15-0. We're coming out of our 5th delica out of the 7, and we're going to sew down through the 6th delica. So that we should have 3 accents sitting on top of our delicas like that. And we should have this one last delica sitting open. So now I'm going to skip over that delica. I'm just going to go ahead and pass down through that next 8OC bead right beneath the delica where I was currently exiting. I'm going to pull my thread through. Then I'm going to stitch up these 2 8OC beads next in line. And now we're ready to add our first Tila. We're going to be adding in this round this Tila, these 2 8/0s, and this Tila. So to pick up for our Tila, the first thing we're going to do is pick up a Delica, then a 15/0, then a Tila. Then we're going to pick up the beads on the top as well. So we'll pick up a 15/0, Delica, 15/0. We're going to let all of that drop down. We're going to take our needle and we're going to come back through the other hole of our Tila, just like that. And we're going to pull. And if it helps, you can lay it down. But what you'll want to do is cinch all of those beads down as close as you can get to the beadwork. Then we'll pick up our 15/0 and our Delica, and we're going to come down through the next 8/0 seed bead. And I'm going down the bead to the right because I'm working in that direction. So there we have our Delica. So now we're going to come up through the next 8/0. So now we're going to pick up 2 of our 8/0 seed beads. And we are going to skip over this first thread bridge and come under the second thread bridge, just like that. We're going to pass up the last one we picked up, which now, because I'm working in this direction, it's going to be the one on my right. So I'm going to pass up through the one on my right. I'm going to come back down through this one on my left to straighten these 2 beads out. And I'm going to come back through my hoop because I accidentally passed through it. And then I'm going to pass back up through the one on the right. So that when I pull my thread, I wind up straightening up the bead that's closest to the Tila. And I'm coming out of this bead here. And I've got my 2 beads situated side by side, just like that. But now I'm exiting the top of this 8/0 seed bead, but where I need to be exiting is the next seed bead over. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to pass down this seed bead to the left. And then I'm going to come down this seed bead on a diagonal on the previous row. The one that's kind of in the middle of those 2 we just added. And I'll pull my thread through. Then I'm going to stitch up through the 8/0 here, the second to the last 8/0 from the previous row. And I'm going to pull my thread through. And now we're going to add another Tila just like we did here. So we'll pick up Delica, 15/0. Then we'll pick up our Tila, a 15/0, a Delica, and a 15/0. We're going to let them drop. We're going to come back through the opposite hole of our Tila, coming back towards the beadwork. We're going to snug that down in. Then we're going to pick up our 15/0 in our Delica, and we're going to come down through that last 8/0 on our previous row. And we're going to pull. So that this is what we have. Now, we want to skip over this Delica, so what we'll need to do at this point is we're going to need to pass down through the 8/0 below the one we're exiting. So I was exiting from this 8/0 right here. I'm going to pass down through the one right below it so that we can get into position. Then I'm going to come up through the next 8/0 to the right, plus the second Delica over, just like that. And I'm going to pull. And now we're just going to repeat our steps to add these 3 little sections of accent beads. And once again, that was to pick up a 15/0, Delica, 15/0. Come down through the next Delica in line. Come up through the next Delica. And repeat that. So we'll pick up 15/0, Delica, 15/0. And come down the next delica. Come up through the second to the last delica. And pick up our last 3 accent beads. 15-0, delica, 15-0. And now we're going to come down the very first delica. And I'm also going to pass down through the 8-0 seed bead right below it. So now I have the exact same mirror image on both sides of my center beads, which in this case are my 2 8-0 seed beads here in the center. And everything is symmetrical on both sides of the beadwork. So next we're going to be adding these Tilas here on the outer edge of our design. We're exiting from this 8-0 seed bead here. What we're going to do is we're going to pass up the seed bead to the 8-0 seed bead to the left, the delica above it, also through the green 15-0 seed bead. So I'm going to pass up through all of those beads and pull my thread through. Then I'm going to come over through the delica that sits atop of the middle accent, group of accent beads right there. Now we're going to add our little delicas. We're going to pick up, because we're coming out of a delica, we're just going to pick up a 15-0 and a Tila bead. Then we're going to pick up the 3 at the top, so that's a 15-0, a delica, and a 15-0. Oh, if I could just get that to stay on my needle, that'd be awesome. All right, so I've got a 15-0, my Tila. Then I have, oops, I've dropped one somewhere, guys. Let me just start over there. So far I've picked up a 15-0 in my Tila. Now I'm going to pick up a 15-0, a delica, and a 15-0. I'm going to come down through the opposite hole of my Tila. Sorry if I got out of frame there. And I'm going to pull that through. Snug everything down to the beadwork. Then I'm going to pick up a 15-0. You can see I started exiting to the left of this delica bead. I'm going to go through the next delica bead, sitting over here on the top of the accents right there. And I'm going to go from right to left through that bead. And I'm going to pull so that my little Tila sits like that and looks just like it does on my other earring. So now I'm going to stitch my way over to these beads. So I'm coming out of that delica bead that's in the center of my accent beads. I'm going to come down through the 15-0 below it. I'm going to come down through the delica and also through the 8-0. So here's what we're coming down through. We're coming out of that delica bead right there. We're going to come down through the green bead, the delica, and the 8-0. And we're going to pull. We're going to make sure that our thread does not get hung up on our beadwork. Then we're going to just stitch up through the next 8-0 to the left. We're going to stitch down 1 8-0 to the left. This time when we stitch up through the 8-0 to our left, we're going to stitch up through 3 beads. So we're going to stitch up through those 3 8-0s. And we're going to pull. Now we're ready to add our middle accent of Tilas right here. To add our embellishment here on the center, we're going to pick up first a delica, then a 15-0, then our Tila. Then we're going to pick up 2 15-0s, a delica, and 2 15-0s. And once we've got those on, we're going to just simply do the same thing we've been doing. We're going to sew down through the opposite hull of our Tila, heading back towards our beadwork. We're going to snug those beads into position. And then we're going to pick up in the opposite here. So we'll pick up the 15-0 first and then the delica. And all we got to do is sew down through 2 of our 8OC beads, just like that. Going towards the left here. Get that nice and snug. And now the final thing we need to do is come over here and add a Tila right here. So I'm just going to stitch back and forth, up and down through my outer row of Tila as 8OC beads until I get to where I need to be. So I've stitched down through these 8OC beads, down and up, down and up. And as I'm going up through this 8O right here, I'm going to pass up through the delica and the green 15-0. That's part of my very first set of accent beads, going from left to right. Then I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go through that delica from left to right. Make sure you don't get your working thread hung up on your beadwork. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and flip this around. So now we're ready to repeat exactly what I did for this adding this Tila right here. So we're going to start by picking up our 15-0, then our Tila, then we're going to pick up a 15-0, a delica, and a 15-0. Yeah, I must be getting tired because I was having quite a few problems there. But we're going to go ahead and drop that down. We're going to come down through the next toe of our Tila, heading back towards our beadwork, and pull everything into position. And if you need to lay it down, that's fine. Then all we've got to do now is pick up our 15-0, and we're going to come through the delica from right to left here. That's a part of the middle set of accent beads on our base. So that we have everything positioned just like we do on our first earring, with this Tila in the center being our focal point. And everything lines up and looks good. So now we've just added that last little set of beads, and we're done with these outer accent beads. So we need to stitch ourselves here to the center so we can add our crystal. So what I'm going to do is I'm coming out of that delica. I'm just going to pass myself right down through the 15-0 to the left. That's part of the accent group. Then the delica beneath. And I'll go ahead and pull that through and secure my last little set of Tilas into place. Then I'm going to come through the 8OC bead right below it. And then I'm going to come through the delica bead right below that. So now I've worked myself back down to the center of my beadwork. I'm ready to add my crystal Chaton. So it's a little bit hard to see from the front, so I'm going to flip this over on the back, and I'm going to show you guys how I attach that crystal. So I've used the delica beads along the side of row 2, along the side of my bezel, and I have attached that to the center 6 15OC beads here on the inside of my bead frame. So I've got a long thread here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to weave this thread off just for the sake of moving it out of my way. I'm going to come up through one of my 15-0s because I'm down there by the bead frame. And I'm just going to weave myself, I'm sorry guys, hold on. Ugh. I was coming out of that delica, so I stitched myself right up through one of my 15-0s. So now I'm on the inside of my bead frame. And my thread is to the back. So I'm just going to stitch back and forth. And I'm going to move some of this thread out of my way. I'm just going to go up and down through those 15-0s till I can maneuver myself out of the way. Because if you'll remember, I left a long thread on my bezel so I could use that to attach my crystal to my bead frame. So once I've got that pretty much moved out of my way, I'm just going to lay it down. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my beaded bezel. So I'm coming out of that delica on row 2 on my beaded bezel, and I'm holding this so that the back side is pointing up. I'm going to bring this bezel in position to sew into my beads, and because my thread is heading in this direction, I'm going to want to start stitching to the left hand side and sew across to the right. Now I've already taken a look at my seed beads here on my frame. I have these 2 seed beads right there coming directly up from my center Tila. So those are my center point. So I'm going to be using 2 beads to the right of that, to the left of that, those 2 in the center, and 2 beads to the right. So I've taken my needle and I'm coming down that bead farthest to the right. So that's we'll call that the first bead, and then the last bead over here will be the 6th bead. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll stitch down through that, and I'm going to hold my crystal into place as best I can. Then I'm going to come up through the 15-0 right beside it, heading towards the right, like that. And it doesn't matter if you drop your crystal or anything else at this point, because we're going to be stitching it in. So now I can pull it in there a little bit snug. And I'm coming out of that next seed bead over, as you can see right there. So now what I want to do is I want to go into the next delica bead that is part of row 2. So I have 2 delica beads side by side there, and I have 2 side by side there. So I want to get the one that's sitting in the middle. And I'm going to push through. And I'm going to pull my work up. And it's a little bit hard to see, but we're going to keep pushing forward through it. So now I'm coming out of that delica bead. I want to come down that seed bead on the right. So I'm going to skip over one, the one my thread is exiting, and I'm going to skip the one and go through the next one. And I'm going to come down, pull my thread through. Then I'm going to come back up that third one, the one to the left, just like that. I'm going to come up through that one back, stitch back into the left, stitching backwards there. And then I'm going to pull that in. Now I'm going to come right back through that same delica that I just sewed through. And if you have to, you can bring it around and pull it out just a little bit so you can see clearly where you're stitching. I'm going to go right back through that delica on my bezel, the same one I just went through. And I'm going to pull. Oops, I've got my other thread tangled up here. Let me move that. All right, now I'm going to pull through. Sorry, folks. So now I'm coming back out of my delica bead here on my bezel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go through the outer bead on the set of 2 right there, plus that very next one on row 2, which is sitting by itself. It doesn't have a mate sitting next to it. So I'm just moving through the beads on my bezel now. And I'm going to pull that through. So now I have worked with this bead, this bead, this bead, and this bead. And I've got 2 left. So I'm going to come down that 6th bead right there. I'm going to pull that in. Then I'm going to backtrack 1 and come back up through that 5th seed bead, 15-0 seed bead. And then I'm going to sew right back through that same delica one more time on my beaded bezel, the one on row 2 that's sitting in the center by itself. Does not have another delica sitting beside it. Then I'm just going to pull that through. I need to get my other thread out of my way. So now here's what we've got. We've got the bead attached. But you can see it's still a little bit wobbly. But we're not done yet. So now I'm coming back out of that delica bead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew right back down through that 6th seed bead on my frame. Right there. One more time. Now I'm going to pull everything nice and snug. So now what I can do is I can come back through these seed beads. I'm going to come up the bead, the 5th bead, one more time. Make sure you don't get your working thread hung up on your Tilas down here. Then I'm just going to stitch myself back through. I'm going to come through my delica on the bezel right there. Pull my thread. Then I'm going to come down through the 4th seed bead on my base. Very gently. I'm going to come up through that 3rd one. I'm working back towards the right now. Then I am going to come back through that delica bead. I have to move my thread just a little bit. I'm going to come back through that delica bead in the center on row 2 of my bezel. Pull. So basically all I'm doing is reinforcing here. And trying not to hang up on my Tilas. So now I've been back through there. I can come back down through that 4th bead, seed bead again on my base. Up through the next one. Oops, looks to me like I got tangled up here, so I'm going to have to fix that. And so now I'm going to sew down and up through the 1st and 2nd seed beads, and I'm going to go through that last delica one more time. Actually, I'm coming down through the 2nd to the last one. I'm going back up through that very 1st one right here. And I forgot that I added a delica in there. So now I'm coming out of that very 1st one again, right here, that I started attaching from. I'm going to pick up a delica. And this time I'm going to sew through the delica on the 2nd row and then the delica above it, which was part of row 1 on the bezel. And you can see I'm pulling that little seed bead into place. Then I want to stitch through to the next 2 delicas on my bezel. So that's a row 2 and a row 1. And now I'm going to stitch through this delica on row 2 over here on this side. Just the one on row 2, just like that. It's the same one we used to stitch down into our 15-0s. But before we stitch down, we're going to pick up a delica. And then we're going to stitch down into that 6th seed bead one last time. And I'm going to have to pay attention and make sure that I get in the right bead, and I need to look for my thread. So that would be this one right here. There's the 1st one, 2nd one, 3rd one, 4th one, 5th one, 6th one. And I'm going to pull that delica right there. So that's what my beadwork looks like. And here's what it looks like from the front. And it matches exactly how I had placed this one here on my original earring. So that's great. So now to tune up, we've taken a long time getting that part done. So now the hard part is over, and I'm sure you guys are glad to hear that. But now we're going to work on getting this row of brick stitch added to the center of our beadwork. So I'm coming out of the bottom of that 6th delica. I'm going to go ahead and stitch up through the next one. I'm coming out of that 15-0. I'm going to stitch up through the next 15-0 to the left. And I'm going to pull my thread through, making sure I don't get hung up on any of my other beads. So now all we're going to do is we're going to brick stitch an even number amount of our topaz delicas around the remaining green beads here in the center. Because we wove this thread in nice and tight, I'm going to go ahead and end the thread on this side, because I have plenty enough thread left over here to do what I want to do. So I can just cut that one off. So now we're going to do some brick stitch, and once again, when we start a row of brick stitch, we always start by picking up 2. And since we're down to using all delicas for this, we're just going to take those beads, drop them down. And it's a little bit hard to see, but you'll be able to do it. We're coming out of that C bead right there. We're going to skip one and come through the next thread bridge. So we're going to be doing, working with our thread bridges just like we did when we stitched our second row of beads here to our delicas. We use thread bridges, and so we're going to use the thread bridge here. So I went under the thread bridge. I'm going to go up through the bead right there, the last one I picked up, which once again is on my left. I'm going to pull that bead into place. Now this part gets a little tricky, but what you're going to want to do is you want to sew down that first bead on the right hand side, just so we can straighten it. You'll go through it from top to bottom, then you're going to come right back up that second bead. Make sure to pay attention to what side of the bead frame your working thread is, because you don't want to stitch around and then wind up with your exposed thread laying over top of your beadwork like that. So now I've got those 2 beads in, and that's the hard part there. The rest of it's just simply doing exactly what we did so many times for this project. We'll pick up a bead, sew under the next thread bridge, then come back up through the bead and go to the back side of the frame again. I'm going to pick up a bead, sew under my next thread bridge again, then sew back up through the bead. And I can see right there that I actually missed my bead, and I have an exposed thread. So what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to go ahead and take mine off, and I'm going to fix that before I get any farther with having a problem. I'm not sure how I had a little bit of something weird going on, but I was able to straighten it up. I just took my needle off, and I pulled that bead out, and then I rethreaded it and stitched it back in. So now I'm just going to carry on by picking up a bead. With my working thread in the back, I'm going to sew under the thread bridge. When I pass back up through my bead, I'm going to poke it back through to the back side of my frame each time. I'll show you a couple more, and then I'm going to let you guys go off and work on this on your own. So I'm picking up a bead. I'm coming under the thread bridge and through to the front side of my hoop. As I go up through the bead I'm adding, I'm also pushing my needle back through to the back side of my hoop, so that when I pull, my beads stand up and they're positioned where they need to be. Just like that. And you can see that one's sitting kind of crooked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down through the previous bead to the right, and then simply go right back up that bead on the left. And that will straighten my beadwork right out. And I don't have any, exposed thread or anything like that. So I'm kind of working upside down, as you can see that I am working from the back side of my beadwork. And I'm just going to work around that circle. And then I'll meet you guys back and we'll add our bail. So I have just added my last delica bead right here. So what I'm going to do is that when we added that one delica bead, when we went up through this part of our bezel, I am going to come down through the top of that delica bead, and then I'm going to go back up through the last one I added in my brick stitch round right here. And so that when I pull, it's going to cinch those 2 beads together. The one that was sitting there right here, and the one over here is on the opposite side. I stitched down through that bead, back up through this bead. Now I'm going to come right back down through that bead again. And I'm going to work my way across this beadwork to the delicate bead on the other side of my bezel. It's a little tricky getting in here because, you know, you've got your bezel kind of sitting in your way. Let me go ahead and pull that through. Well, I screwed up, guys. You'll see what not to do by watching me. I was on the back side of my beadwork, and I was trying to go through that delica from the front. So I was able to stitch down through that delica on the right side of the project now, and I'm going down through that 15-0 underneath. So all I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to stitch myself across till I'm coming up through this delicate bead here that we also added on this side, and I'm going to stitch that bead and the very first bead together. So allow me to just stitch up and down through my 15-0s, and I'm going to meet you when I get over there. So I was coming down out of the bottom of that one. I'm going to come back up through the next one. This is where you got to really be careful not to catch your thread on your working project. Actually, so now that I'm coming up through that bead, I can use these beads on my bezel to move across the beadwork. And I think that is exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to dig into that bead on the delica on the bezel. And I'm going to stitch across that bezel till I get to where I want to be. It's going to be a lot easier than trying to get in and out of those 15-0s. So I'm going to stitch on the diagonal, so I'm moving through those next two delicas right there. And then I only need to come through 2 more. So I'm still stitching on the diagonal right there. And now I can pass down through this delica right here that we added. So I'm going to come down through that delica. And then I'm going to stitch it to this very first delica that I did on my brick stitch. So I'm going to come up through that bead. Make sure I don't hang up my thread. Then I'm going to go right back down through that delica there again, adding a thread bridge at both the bottom and the top of those two delicas. And also what that does is it secures your beadwork just a little bit more snugly and securely. It secures the crystal to the frame. So now I'm just going to move up and down these delicas that I just added in this brick stitch until I get here to the top where I can add the bail. And the only part that we need to be careful about is make sure that you stay on the right side of your bead frame as you're stitching. So I'm just going to go up and down and up and down through my delicas. Then we'll talk about how to center the bail at the top of our earring. So I've stitched my way up towards the top. And when I get what looks, you know, I'm eyeballing it right here, but I'm going up through a delica, so I'm going to go ahead and pass up through the green seed bead right above it and pull my thread through. Because now I want to get to the outside row. But before I do, I should have 22 seed beads left open here on the outside edge. So what I want to work with is the 11th bead and the 12th bead. Those will be dead center above my Chaton and above my Tila here in the center. So all I'm going to do is just count up to my 11th bead. I'm going to fix my eye visor here so I can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I'm coming out right here. So I'm just going to come up through that 11th delica on the outside edge. Just like that. And then I'm going to check my count and make sure. I've got a little bit of a gap between these two beads right here. But I'm going to fix that once I add my bail. So I went ahead and I was actually coming out of the wrong bead, so I stitched over. I corrected my gap between those two beads, and I stitched myself back. So now I'm just going to lay my other earring on top, because I want these two to match. And you can do the same once you get your second earring made. So now I'm coming out of this delica right here, which is hard to see with the glare. But I'm in a position to where I can just add my bail now and come down the right bead to the left, and everything should match up really nice, and my bail will be centered. So basically, all we have to do now is repeat picking up these beads in exactly this order. So we're going to pick up a 15-0, then the Tila. Then we're going to pick up 2 of our delicas, and we're going to pick up all but 2 of these C beads, and I think that should be 9 C beads. So let's see. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have 2 left, 1 for the bottom and 2 for the top. So I want you to pick up. Let's try that again. We're going to pick up a 15-0, a Tila, 2 delicas, and then 7 of our 15-0s. And we're going to bring those down and let it all drop down just like that right there. We're going to hold on to our bead right here, and we're just going to come right back through just the very first delica, working in the opposite direction back towards our earring here. We're going to pull all of those little seed beads into a loop, and we should be coming out of the top delica, just like that. Now we're going to pick up a delica, and we're going to come through the open hole of our Tila. We're going to pull that through. And what that does is that centers our little loop of beads above our Tila. So now we need to pick up 1 of our 15-0s, and we're going to come back through the C bead on the delica bead on our base. And I was working back towards the left, so I'm going to come back through the one on the left. And I'm going to pull all of that through. And here's what my bead work looks like. So now I'm going to stitch back up that delica to the right, the green seed bead, and then I'm going to go through my Tila and my very first delica here on the right. Just like that. And I'm going to pull. And we're going to reinforce this. And we're going to add these last 2 little seed beads into our design. So now I want to come up through that delica bead right here in the center. Oops, dropped my needle. So I'm going to come up through that delica right there in the center, and I'm going to pull. Okay, so I had broken a bead, and I took it all off, and I redid it. And I've got myself back to the place where I've stitched up through that center bead. So now I was working from the right, and I still am, so I'm going to stitch up through 3 of my green seed beads here on the right. And I'm going to go ahead and pull my thread. So now I'm going to pick up 1 15-0, and I'm going to stitch through just the very next seed bead from right to left. I'm going to pull that bead in, and I'm going to pop it in there. You'll hear it pop in. It makes a little corner there. I'm going to pick up another seed bead, and then I'm going to sew down through the 3 seed beads here on the left. If I can see. So I stitched through that bead, and now I'm going to stitch down. I picked up a bead, and I'm going to stitch down these 3 on the left. I'm not sure why I'm having such a hard time, but all of a sudden I am. But now you can see that I have that cute little triangular shape, just like on my other earrings. So now I'm coming down through that center delica at the top of the other 2. Pull that in. Then I'm going to come down my delica on the left and come through my Tila and the green seed bead on the bottom of the Tila. And I'm going to pull all that through. And so now I have my bail added. I'm just going to check it against my other earring and make sure that everything lines up. And it does, and everything looks great. So my bail is centered really nice. So now I just need to get rid of my working thread. So I'm coming out of that green seed bead there below my bail. I'm going to come right down through that delica below it. And all I'm going to do to weave off my thread is I'm going to pass up and down through these delicas on the left-hand side of my beadwork. And I'm going to do several stitches to secure my thread. Every now and then I'm going to backtrack by stitching backwards one bead to the right and then up one bead to the left. And if I do that a couple of times as I work my way down, that guarantees me that my working thread is nice and secure and will not work back out of my earring. So I'm coming down a bead to the left. I'm going to backtrack one more time here and go up the bead to the right. Come back down the bead to the left. Move down a few more beads. Going up and down. Up and down. And then I'm going to backtrack one more time. Coming down a bead to the right. And then going back up my bead to the left. Then I'm going to stitch up one more bead. You can see here that I've reached my 8/0 seed beads right there. And I'm just going to take my needle and dive under the stitch there at my 8/0. Pull really slow. Grab the loop and pull a half hitch knot underneath that 8/0 seed bead. Then I'm going to move away from that knot by coming up the 8/0. Moving through my accent beads here. And coming down the next 8/0. Right through the green seed bead and down the next 8/0. And I can safely end my thread at this point because I did a lot of backtracking to secure my thread. So I'm just going to take my scissors and end the thread. So now all we have left to do is add our earring finding. I'm going to take my pliers and open up my earring hook by twisting it to the side. Then I'm going to make sure that I place this loop onto the earring finding so that my crystal hangs forward like that. Then I'm just going to simply take my pliers and by pushing the little wire back over to the side, and then also to make sure, give it a little squeeze to make sure that it's closed all the way. And then I'll just bring these the little spring and the ball back down forward just like that. And we have my beautiful set of earrings. So I apologize if part 3 of this video seemed a little less well done, but for some reason I was really struggling with my work on this portion of the tutorial. Anyhow, I hope you like these beautiful earrings. I think they're really pretty. I've tried on the one that I already had made, and they just looked super fantastic on. If you like it, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel for more to come in the new year. I've got lots of new announcements that I'll be making as we get on through towards the end of December about plans I have for the Alluring Bead Boutique website and the Bead Map blog. But I'll share that all with you in another video. This has been pretty long, so you guys have a great day. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.